let's jump into this. The content. Okay, information architecture today. So where is our community at right now? Last year at the Information Architecture Summit in San Diego, it was quite a watershed conference, because they had 3 tracks, A, B, and C, and the B track was dedicated to people that were presenting on stuff that was very much focused on a reframing of information architecture, kind of putting a line in the sand and saying information architecture is not what it was before. And they were quite theoretical presentations. In the past, the conference has been very interested in kind of practitioner-oriented stuff, like how-to presentations. And for the first time, they were putting real, strong thought pieces on. And Peter Merholz, he was one of the 2 co-founders. He and Jesse James Garrett started Adaptive Path. He's a very, very big voice in the UX community in general. And this is what he said. The IA Summit has just finished. 7 years ago, I wrote how IA was not dead, but sleeping. There was a period in the field's history that felt stagnant and disappointing, because IA allowed itself to fall under the user experience umbrella, and the summit started to feel like any UX conference warmed over. But starting last year and coming on strong this year, there has been a new energy born of an exchange of ideas that really can only be called information architecture. Track B this year was what I've been looking for from this event: deep, penetrating. That interrogated the role of the practice, the meaning and the relevance of information architecture. What the community is recognizing is there is no need to make excuses, and in fact, the practice of information architecture is increasingly crucial and essential in addressing challenges we face as people, community, and society. I look forward to seeing you in Minneapolis next year. That was a punt. So this year, I think it's in about a month and a half's time, the ISAM will be in Minneapolis. The other kind of big thing that's happened is pretty much since around 2005, 2006, interaction design has had this kind of near godly presence in our community. Information, swallowed up information architecture was all about rich apps. It was like you couldn't do anything. It's like interaction design owns the space completely. And I think it was literally like yesterday or the day before, Kenneth Barnes was, he's also quite a big voice in the community. And he was one of the founders of Clear Left, the guys that were doing a lot of that early pioneering work around responsive design with Andy Budd and those guys. And he wrote this post recently called Void and Matter. And he talks about kind of designing stuff that's bigger than you, or designing stuff that is sort of smaller than you. Not that in any way there's a hierarchy, like one is better or bigger or more important than the other. But the point that he was making was maybe IA is the larger than human stuff, the constructions that people inhabit. Topology, roots, flow, doorways, light, maximum capacities, designing the void. And then maybe interaction design is the smaller than human stuff, the tools people manipulate, materials with properties and responses, the time axis that makes 3D 4D, how you move around and twist it, how they beat and complain, designing the matter, designing the void, designing matter, maybe. If you said this in like 2006, you would be hung, drawn, and quartered. Like you could never suggest this. So this fact that the community is starting to come around to this re-emergence of information architecture and people actually being able to say this and not having their careers ruined is a massive shift in what's been happening. So that was the community. So where's the practice at? It is 20 years since William Gibson wrote Neuromancer. If you haven't read Neuromancer, you really, really need to. It was one of the very early cyberpunk books. It was the book in which he coined the phrase cyberspace. And the book is a description of the internet. And it takes about, you have to be, I think it's around page 70, that all of a sudden you realize that all the action that's taking place is a description of information running through a wire. So the whole world that you've just been chucked into and that you believe in is actually just data flowing through a wire. And I think this is a quote that a quote from him. One of the things our grandchildren will find quaintest about us is that we distinguish the digital from the real. And I think we're already at that point. That younger generation is upon us already. It's not like this is another science fiction or futuristic statement. It is upon us, this intersection of the digital and the real. Another thing that is impacting the practice and the often the organizational components of what we're doing is the rise of digital first as a corporate strategy. And this has increased the need for information architecture and also a new kind of information architecture. It's an information architecture about and for a much broader ecosystem than it was previously applied. So we're talking about the information architecture of the website, the IA across owned digital channels, so the apps companies make, IA across borrowed digital spaces like social media, the information architecture integrated into extended services from third parties, IA across staff-assisted, digitally enabled channels like call centers and stores, the IA integrated into ecosystem tools like phone, and the information architecture of companies and organizations themselves. And it brings us to stuff that started being spoken about and written around 2011. This is Andrea Resmini's QQ. And already these are information architecture models where you can start mapping tasks on one channels on another, and you can layer in on top of that heuristics or principles or strategies or whatever it might be. And these were just early attempts to start modeling ways to start thinking about the complexity of designing for these kinds of ecosystems. And as a consequence of this, another, I think, important point is that information architecture and service design are getting closer and closer to each other. And happily for the community of practice, practitioner books continue to be written. This is Abby Covert's How to Make Sense of Any Mess. It's been very, very popular. The Polar Bear book is about to release, I think it's 4th edition, something like that. So practitioner books continue to be published and disseminated into the world. So we did community and then we did practice, and so where's the theory at? Last year, in conjunction with that conference in San Diego, Springer published a book called Reframing Information Architecture as part of their HCI series. And this is a very, very important and significant milestone in the history, as I said earlier, very young history of information architecture. And obviously it's a Springer text, it's a very academic text, and it's all the authors who are in it are talking about a very new way of thinking about information architecture from lots of different perspectives. So I'd like to read to you from the preface. Information architecture has changed. When practice went mainstream in the mid-1990s, library and information science, the core body of knowledge and expertise introduced by pioneers Lou Rosenfeld and Peter Morville, seemed to be all that was necessary. Information architecture was mostly seen as some sort of library science for the web, largely tackling problems of labeling, categorization, and ordering. Today, the illusion of the web as a library and the internet as a different and separated world have given way to a much more complex scenario. We live in a post-digital world in which digital and physical blend easily, and the internet is a piece in a larger mechanism where our activities and our use, consumption and production of information happens across multiple contexts, through multiple devices, and unstable, emergent choreographies. We move from the screen to the world to portable computing, smartphones and ambient devices, and focus has necessarily moved away from the single artifact, the website, to consider the entire product or service ecosystem as a complex cross-channel information-based beast, some parts of which may not be online or may not be digital at all. Information architecture in the mid-2010s is steadily growing into a channel or medium A-specific, multidisciplinary framing, with contributions coming in from architecture, urban planning, design, and systems thinking, cognitive science, new media, anthropology, that have been heavily reshaping the practice. Conversations about labeling, websites, and hierarchies have been replaced by conversations about sense-making, place-making, design, architecture, cross-media complexity, embodied cognition, and their application to the architecture of information spaces as places we live in as an increasingly larger part of our lives. So this is a radical shift that we're in the middle of right now. And then I'd like to just finish off with something really left field, but really kind of cool. So Vint Cerf, who was one of those kind of godfathers of the internet, hit the news last week when he was saying that we are at risk of losing a massive amount of historical data about our time because of the way we lose data in the shifts and changes that we have in technology, hardware, and things like that. And it was a kind of call to action to the world to say we need to figure out this archiving problem. And literally about 3 days later, a news report came out that Swiss researchers had managed to encode the Swiss equivalent of the Magna Carta into DNA. So the text has literally been encoded into 5,000 strands of DNA. And that DNA has been covered with a really nano-thin layer of silicon. And it can, in theory, last forever. And soon we'll be architecting for DNA, and Google will have to figure out a way to search it. Thank you very much.